Appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts on an important subject tonight. Earlier this week, I spoke about the President's promise that he would issue an executive amnesty, a grant of amnesty to 5 to 6 million people by some form of executive orders, his own hand, his own pen. The planned amnesty would include work permits, photo IDs, and social security numbers for millions of people who are here illegally, who entered the country illegally, or who came on a lawful visa and overstayed. A large number are here illegally in that fashion, or have defrauded immigration officials in some way. I've laid out how the Senate Democrat Conference has supported and enabled the President's action and blocked so far every effort to stop it. Not one of our Democratic colleagues has backed the House legislation that would stop this executive amnesty or demanded that Senator Reid bring it up for a vote, at least. Every Senate Democrat is therefore the President's partner in his planned lawless acts. Plainly, the President must execute the law that was passed by Congress. And the law does not allow for unlawful immigrants to work in America. It doesn't allow for many other things they are suggesting he may plan to do by executive order. Today, I would like to talk about the influence of special interest on what is happening to our nation's immigration laws and how it's in creating unwise and really unlawful policies. How did we get to the point where elected officials, activist groups, the ACLU, and global CEOs are openly working to deny the American workers the immigration's protections to which they are legally entitled? How did we get to the point where the Democratic Party in Washington is prepared to nullify and wipe away the immigration laws of the United States of America? And we are at that point, colleagues. Just yesterday, Majority Leader Reid wrote something that was shocking. He said, quote, "Since House Republicans have failed to act on immigration, I know the President will. When he does, I hope he goes real big," close quote. That's the Majority Leader of the Senate. He intends to do nothing that will allow anything to occur in the Senate that would stop the President's actions. But colleagues, we know better. This body is not run by one man. We don't have a dictator in the great United States Senate. Every member has a vote. And the only way Senator Reid could do such a thing, to block this Senate from voting in a way that would stop the President's executive actions, is to not support him in his plan. Every senator needs to stand up and represent their constituents, not big business, not ACLU, not activist groups, not political interests, but the American interest, the workers' interest. That's what we need to expect from them, and we don't have but a few weeks, it looks like, to get it done. So let this sink in for a moment. The leader of the Senate Democrats is bragging that he knows the President will circumvent Congress to issue executive amnesty to millions, and he is encouraging the President to ensure this amnesty includes as many people as possible. And the White House has acknowledged 5 to 6 million is the number they're looking at. Has one Senate Democrat stepped forward to reject Mr. Reid's statement? Has one Senate Democrat stepped forward to say, I support the House plan, the legislation passed by the House of Representatives that would secure the border and block this executive amnesty? Have they ever said they support that? Have they ever said that I will do everything in my power to see that this issue, the House legislation, at least gets a vote in the Senate so the American people can know what's going on? Nope. all we hear is silence. In effect, the entire Senate Democratic Conference has surrendered the jobs, wages, and livelihoods of their constituents to a group of special interest meeting in secret at the White House. What Congress has refused to pass, and the American people have rejected time and again, they are plotting at the White House, maybe even more so today, to do it anyway, no matter what the people think, no matter what Congress, the people's house, votes on. Politico reports that White House officials have conducted more than 20 meetings in the White House. I doubt they've had 20 meetings on ISIS. 20 meetings in the White House and in July and August with legal experts, immigration advocates, business leaders to gather ideas on what should be included in the order. Now that's a quote from the Politico magazine. 20 meetings with legal experts, immigration advocates, business leaders to gather ideas on what should be included in his order. So who are these so-called experts, advocates, and business leaders? They're not the law enforcement officers. They're not our ICE officers. They're not our Border Patrol officers. They're not the American working man and woman. They're not unemployed Americans. They weren't in the room. You can be sure of that. Their opinions weren't sought. No, White House officials are meeting with the world's most powerful and corporate immigration lobbyists and activists who think border controls are for the little people. We know better. The administration is meeting with the elite, the cosmopolitan set, who scorn and mock the concerns of everyday Americans, concerned about their schools, jobs, wages, communities, hospitals. These great and powerful citizens of the world, we know, don't care much about old-fashioned things like national boundaries, national sovereignty, immigration controls, let alone the constitutional separation of powers, or even the consistent and even-handed enforcement of plain law passed by the elected representatives of the American people in due fashion. Well, see, don't you get it? They believe they're always supposed to get whatever it is that they want. They're used to that. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars. In fact, one report says they've spent $1.5 billion since 2007 trying to pass their desired immigration bill. $1.5 billion. Whatever they want, they think is good for America. They tried and tried and tried to pass the bill through Congress, but the American people said no, no, no. So they decided, well, we'll just go to the president. We'll go to President Obama, and we'll insist that he implement these measures through executive fiat. And Senate Democrats apparently have said, well, that's just a wonderful idea. We support that. Just do it. Go big. But, Mr. President, wait a little bit. Wait till after the election. We don't want the voters to hold us accountable for what you're doing. We want to pretend we in the Senate have nothing to do with it. So one of the groups that's joined the chorus of special interest demanding executive satisfaction on immigration is Forward.us. Forward.us is the group run by Facebook guru, CEO Mark Zuckerberg. I think he just turned 30, worth about $28 billion, I understand. Mr. Zuckerberg has been very busy recently. One of his fellow billionaires, Mr. Carlos Slim, maybe the world's richest man, invited Mr. Zuckerberg down to Mexico City, to give a speech. And what did Mr. Zuckerberg promote in his speech? Well, this is the report of it. And I guess first I would note, young Mr. Zuckerberg maybe doesn't know that there's deep American tradition, and a tradition in most developed nations, really. You don't go to a foreign capital to criticize your own government. I suppose he doesn't know about that. They probably didn't teach him that when he was at one of the elite schools he attended. This is what he said in Mexico City. Quote, "We have a strange immigration policy for a nation of immigrants, and it's a policy unfit for today's world," close quote. So, the masters of the universe are very fond of open borders, as long as these open borders don't extend to their gated compounds and fenced off estates. I just have to note, here's an article late last fall in Business Insider about Mr. Zuckerberg's actions. The headline is, "Mark Zuckerberg just spent more than $30 million buying 4 neighborhood houses for privacy." This is what the article says. Quote, "Mark Zuckerberg just made an unusual purchase." Well, 4 purchases. Facebook's billionaire founder bought 4 homes surrounding his current home in Palo Alto. Mercury News reports the houses cost him more than $30 million, including one 2,600 square foot home that cost $14 million. His own home is twice as large at 5,000 square feet and cost as much. Larry Page made a similar move a few years ago so he could build a 6,000-foot mansion, but Mr. Zuckerberg's reason is different. He doesn't want to live in excess. He just wants a little privacy. That's the world the average American doesn't live in. So Mr. Zuckerberg, who's become the top spokesman for expanding the admission of foreign workers, championed the Senate immigration bill that all 4 of our Democratic colleagues voted for. All of our Democratic colleagues voted for. One of the things that the bill did was double the supply of low-wage foreign workers brought into the United States for companies like Facebook. We've been told for a long time, and most of us have heard this repeatedly, that there is a shortage of STEM and IT workers. STEM are science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This has been the central selling point of these massive demands for increases in foreign worker programs across the board. Programs that bring in workers for every sector in the U.S. economy. But we know from the nation's leading academics, people who study this issue and are professionals in it. I have a recent op-ed here from USA Today that there is actually not a shortage but a surplus of Americans with training in STEM and IT fields, and that this is why wages have not increased since 1999. If you have a shortage of workers in a field like information technology or science and mathematics, wages go up, do they not? If wages aren't up and indeed basically down, and since 1999, I think the case for our free market friends is pretty clear. We don't have a shortage. So rich, high-tech companies are using the H-1B visa program to keep wages down and to hire less expensive workers from abroad. Indeed, the same companies demanding more guest workers are laying off American workers in droves. So I'd like to read some key excerpts from an article published in USA Today, co-authored recently by 5 experts of the nation on labor markets and the guest worker program. USA Today, and I think it tells a story that has not been refuted. We have partisans, advocates that have been claiming there's a shortage in these fields, but the experts say no, and since they've been speaking out on this, we've heard no real data that would dispute what they say in this article of July 27th, just two or three weeks ago. Headline, Bill Gates' Text Worker Fantasy. Subheadline, Silicon Valley has created an imaginary staffing shortage. An imaginary staffing shortage. Quote, business executives and politicians endlessly complain there is a shortage of qualified Americans and that the U.S. must admit more high-skilled guest workers to fill jobs in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math. This claim is echoed by everyone from President Obama and Rupert Murdoch to Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. Yet within the past month, two odd things occurred. Census reported that only 1 in 4 STEM degree holders is actually in a STEM job. And Microsoft announced plans to downsize its workforce by 18,000. He goes on to say, referring to themselves, the 5 writers of this article, none of us has been able to find any credible efforts to support the IT industry's assertions of labor shortages. Ron Hero, Paula Steffen, Hal Saltzman, Michael Teitelbaum, just written a big book on this recently, Norm Matlock. These are labor economic experts who studied these issues for years. Many of them have testified before Congress. They say none of us has been able to find any credible evidence to support IT industry's assertions of labor shortages. What a statement that is. All right, they go on to write. This is all of them. They signed this article together. If a shortage did exist, wages would be rising as companies tried to attract scarce workers. Instead, legislation that expanded visas for IT personnel during the 1990s has kept average wages flat over the past 16 years. Indeed, guest workers have become the predominant source of new hires in these fields, close quote. The predominant source of new hires in information technology fields are coming through guest worker program from abroad. They go on to say, quote, those supporting even greater expansion seem to have forgotten about the hundreds of thousands of American high-tech workers who are being shortchanged by wages stuck at 1998 levels, by diminished career prospects, and by repeated rounds of layoffs. They go on to say, quote, there is an ample supply of American workers who are willing and qualified to fill high-skilled jobs in this country. The only real disagreement is whether the supply is 2 or 3 times larger than the demand, close quote. I say there's no doubt we have a surplus of IT workers. The question is whether it's 2 or 3 times the number. The supply is 2 or 3 times as big as the number of job openings. They go on to say, quote, unfortunately, companies are exploiting the large existing flow of guest workers, foreign workers coming into the country, simply to work in these industries for limited periods of time, not to become a permanent citizen. They work here for a number of years and return to their country, usually, many of them. They're exploiting the large existing flow of guest workers to deny American workers access to STEM careers and middle-class security that should come with them. Imagine then how many more Americans would be frozen out of the middle class if politicians and high-tech moguls succeeded in doubling or tripling the flow of guest workers into STEM occupations. Close quote. And that is exactly what the bill before this Senate, the bill that the House of Representatives rejected, would have done. It would have doubled the number of guest workers coming into America just to take jobs. coming here for the very purpose of taking a job that we need Americans to be taking. The article goes on. Another major yet often overlooked provision in the pending legislation, that's the one that President Obama is pushing for, the Gang of Eight bill, would grant automatic green cards to any foreign student who earns a degree in a STEM field based on assertions that foreign graduates of U.S. universities are routinely being forced to leave America. Such claims are incompatible with the evidence that such graduates have many paths to stay and work, and indeed the stay rates for visiting international students are very high and have shown no sign of decline. The most recent study finds that 92% of Chinese PhD students stay in America to work after graduation. Close quote. So there's this myth that we have thousands and thousands of students graduating from schools and being sent home. And that's just not accurate, according to the experts who study the data. Quote, the tech industry's promotion of expanded temporary visas, such as H-1B and green cards, is driven by a desire for cheap, young, immobile labor. It is well documented that loopholes enable firms to legally pay H-1Bs below their market value and to continue the widespread age discrimination acknowledged by many in the tech industry. Close quote. I talked to a gentleman that I knew a little bit. He worked at a computer company. All these companies are, he's well in his 40s, maybe close to 50. I asked him what kind of security it was. He said, well, you know, in the tech industry, these companies go and fall. And I said, well, what happened if you were to lose your job? He said, at my age, it'd be very difficult. That's a sort of a poignant moment to me. This man, family, raising children, doing the right thing, worried at his age whether he can get a job when the majority of people being hired in these fields are H-1B guest worker hires. The article concludes by saying IT industry leaders have spent lavishly on lobbying to promote their STEM shortage claims among legislators, us. The only problem is that the evidence contradicts their self-interested claims. I think this is a dramatic article. I think it's an article by undisputed experts in the field. And to my knowledge, no one has disputed it. And the false claims, the tech world fantasy claims in USA Today, as is referred to, it's an imaginary shortage they're talking about, not a real shortage, and it doesn't justify the actions they're asking to take. So I would pose a question to Mr. Zuckerberg, who's a brilliant man with so many fabulous qualities, and I respect that. But I read in the news that Facebook, his company, is now worth more than $200 billion. Is that not enough money to hire American workers for a change? Your company now employs roughly 7,000 people. Let's say you want to expand your workforce 10% or hire another 700 workers. Are you really claiming you can't find 700 Americans who would take these jobs if you paid a good wage and decent benefits? And let me just say one more thing. How many people does Facebook have? It's just an internet-type company. It has 7,000 workers. Microsoft just laid off 18,000. Why doesn't Mr. Zuckerberg call his friend Mr. Gates and say, look, I got to hire a few hundred people. You got any resumes you can send over here? Maybe I won't have to bring in somebody from a foreign country to take a job that an unemployed American might take. Not a It's a serious matter. I wanted to just continue to talk about this. There's this myth that we have this surging employment in the high-tech industry. According to a recent Reuters report, U.S. employers announced 50,000 layoffs in August of 2013, up 34% from the previous month and up 57% through August 2012. Hewlett-Packard, high-tech company, laid off 29,000 employees in 2012. 29,000. In August of 2013, Cisco announced plans to lay off 4,000 workers in addition to the 8,000 cut in the last 2 years. And Cisco was in the White House, writing the White House this summer with a group of other companies demanding more workers from abroad. Cisco was signing the letter with a bunch of other companies. United Technologies announced 3,000 layoffs this year. American Express cut 5,400 jobs. Procter & Gamble announced 5,700 jobs cut in 2012. T-Mobile announced plans to lay off 2,250 employees in 2012. Well, the shortage is not there. The experts tell us, and the plain fact, if you look around us, would indicate that. But instead, Forward.us and other immigration lobbyists are working with the White House this very day, over the summer, many meetings, to extract executive orders from the president that provide them with the same financial benefits that were included in the Senate bill that was rejected by the House of Representatives. One proposal would increase by as much as 800,000 the number of foreign workers admitted for the explicit purpose of taking jobs in the United States. And this is an article that talks about that. And it's a matter of importance. It's an Associated Press article. The title of it, Obama weighs broader move on legal immigration. Quote, President Obama is considering key changes in the nation's immigration system requested by tech, industry, and powerful interest groups. Not by the American people was he being requested to do this. Not by the national interest, but the special interest, powerful special interest groups is referred to here. Goes on to say, quote, after recent White House meetings, top officials have compiled specific recommendations from business groups and other advocates. Other advocates. Who all are they? We know the ACLU has been there. We know La Raza has been meeting there on a regular basis. It goes on, the article says, quote, one of the most popular requests is a change in the way green cards are counted that would essentially free up some 800,000 additional visas the first year, advocates say. Well, other requests would extend work permits to the spouses of all temporary H-1B skilled workers who have not been able to work. I guess those spouses, that's nice. The spouse can get a job. But how about a single mom might like that job? An unemployed single mom, or a single mom who has a job prospect who would pay $3 an hour more than the job she's now working at, trying to raise a family. Or an unemployed father. Maybe they'd like those jobs first. So these actions follow on the heels of previous executive actions in which the president already acted unilaterally earlier this year to grant companies an additional 100,000 guest workers. He's already done that. In just the first year of this order, we added 100,000 guest workers. by providing work authorization to the foreign spouses of temporary guest workers. So it would increase the supply of guest workers by approximately 30,000 each year thereafter. This at a time when we have 58 million working-age Americans who are not working. Since 2009, the number of adults has increased by 13 million, while the number of people actually working has decreased by 7 million. Median household income has dropped $2,300 since 2009. According to the National Employment Law Project, wages are down across all occupations. It's what the CBS reported recently. The title of this section is Why American Workers Feel Increasingly Poor. Quote, real median hourly wages have declined across low, middle, and high income levels from 2009 to 2013, the study found. No matter if workers were in the lowest bracket, $8.84 an hour to $10.85 an hour, or the highest bracket, $31.40 an hour to $86 an hour, median hourly wages declined when you take into account the impact of inflation. Goes on, quote, across all occupations, real median hourly wages slipped 3.4% since 2009, while even better paid workers saw median hourly earnings erode. The worst hit segments were at the bottom. The people that got hurt the most were at the bottom, with declines in their wages more than 4%. Close quote. How is it that we've got business types, lobbyist types, activists, immigration groups, clever politicians able to demand that we have to have more workers in America? Well, we've got a decline in wages and a decline in jobs. But what does the president do? His administration issues an executive order to provide foreign spouses, the citizens of other countries, not American citizens, with 100,000 jobs in the United States. Precious jobs that many Americans would love to have. How many American spouses struggling to support their families would benefit from one of those jobs? How many single moms would benefit from a chance to earn a better paycheck? Our Senate Democratic friends talk about paycheck fairness repeatedly, yet they are supporting policies that take jobs and wages directly from American women by the millions. Immigration policy is supposed to serve the national interest, is it not? The people of the United States. Not the interest of a few activist CEOs and the politicians who are catering to them. We've had 40 years of mass immigration, combined with falling wages, a shrinking workforce, exploding welfare rolls. We know that, don't we, friends and colleagues? It's time for a shift in emphasis. It's time to get our own people back to work, and our communities out of poverty, and our schools back on their feet. Harvard professor, Dr. George Borjas, probably the leading academic in this entire area, and has been for many years. He estimates that our current immigration rates result in an annual loss of more than $400 billion in wages for Americans competing with immigrant labor. Between 2000 and today, the government issued nearly 30 million visas to temporary foreign workers and permanent immigrants, largely lower skilled and lower wage. A recent Reuters poll showed Americans wish to see record immigration reduced, not increased, by a huge 3-to-1 margin, as a Gang of 8 bill would have done. Another poll from pollster Kelly and Conway very recently showed that 80% of Americans think companies should hire from existing unemployed rather than bringing in new workers from abroad to fill these jobs. Yet, Senate Democrats have unanimously supported legislation to double the annual supply of labor brought into the United States. To double. Now, some people think this is agriculture workers. Not so. The increase in immigration under that bill would be 80, 90+% non-agricultural work. These jobs are going to be taken by anyone. So what about the good and decent and patriotic citizens of our country who fight our wars, who obey our laws, who follow our rules, and want a better future for their children? Shouldn't their needs come first? As a National Review explained, we are a nation with an economy, not an economy with a nation. We can't put the parochial demands of a few powerful CEOs ahead of an entire nation's hopes, dreams, and aspirations. The basic social contract is that citizens agree to follow the law, pay their taxes, devote their love and loyalty to their country, and in exchange, the nation commits to preserve and protect and serve their interest, safeguard their freedom, and return to them in kind their first allegiance of loyalty. The job of elected officials is to answer to the people who sent them to Washington, not to scorn them, not to demean them, not to mock them, not to sell their jobs and dreams to the highest bidder. Mr. President, I thank the chair. We note the absence of support.